Won't you listen to reason? Will you open your eyes? It's a wonder what you'll find with an open mind. You may be surprised. Yeah, gotta get away from this illusion. For the sake of the world, this delusion. It's gotta go.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Atheist Experience. We're live. I'm at Dillahunty. This is Jen Peeples, and it is January 12th, 2014.
Yeah.
And we're still in the new year.
That's
I
right.
mentioned it last year,
Yeah.
or last week.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a live call-in television program. We'll have the number up for you shortly, where we interact with theists and atheists about what they believe and why, or what their concerns are, and just have conversations and some debates. But a lot of times, before we actually get started with callers, somebody has something they want to talk about, and that's today.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right.
All right.
Holding up. And you wanted to talk about brain dead.
Yeah. Brain dead is dead.
It is.
Really.
Okay.
So there's
First caller? Oh, that wasn't it. There's more to brain dead is dead. Let's get to it.
You know, the cameras are like really close today. I feel like I can just like reach out there and touch the audience.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool. So
Put some clothes on.
yeah. Anyway, so there's a couple of cases in the news right now where people are letting wishful thinking and grief interfere with decision making. There's one case involving a young girl out in California. This young girl went in for surgery to correct a sleep apnea problem that was causing, I guess, her to stop breathing during the night. And so she had surgery to correct this, and I guess it involved removing her tonsils and maybe some other surgery. And she started hemorrhaging shortly after the surgery. The doctors couldn't stop the hemorrhaging. Ultimately, her heart failed, and at some point she was declared brain dead. So not just that her heart stopped and they couldn't get it resuscitated, because they actually did get it resuscitated, but unfortunately she had suffered other medical events and she was brain dead. So the doctors explained this to her parents, who refused to accept it. And they went to court to stop the hospital from removing this girl from a ventilator that was artificially keeping her heart and lungs and her body functioning. And since then, they've been to court a couple of times. The hospital refused to insert a feeding tube and a breathing tube because there is no ethical duty to treat the dead. And once you're brain dead, game over, you're dead. And so, and to be clear, she was not in a persistent vegetative state. She was not in a coma. There was like nothing, no electrical activity in her brain other than just random neurons firing here and there. So the hospital is saying, hey, she's dead, you know, and they were trying to help the parents come to terms with this, and they refused to come to terms with this. So since then, this girl has been, she was released to the coroner because she had been declared dead. So they released her to the coroner, who then released her body to her parents, who had her transported to what I've heard was a Catholic care facility, where she has now undergone surgery to have a feeding tube and a breathing tube inserted to maintain her body. So this religious organization is now maintaining this dead girl on life support, I guess for as long as her body will continue on this life support. So that's the first case. The second case involves a woman in Texas who suffered, as I understand it, a pulmonary embolism, which resulted in her brain being deprived of oxygen for over an hour. So she got to the hospital. They did test. She's brain dead. Unfortunately for her, she was also 14 weeks pregnant when this happened. And there's a law in Texas that says you can't remove a pregnant woman from life support. The hospital and I guess the authorities that are involved in this case have interpreted that to mean that a brain-dead woman who is pregnant must be maintained on life support until the fetus is determined to be viable or it dies. So this woman's body is being used as an incubator for a fetus, even though her husband has said, look, she didn't want this. She was clear about this. She and her husband were both paramedics. They knew what being maintained on life support entailed, and she did not want this. So in spite of her wishes, she is basically having her body used as an incubator. Now, this could be termed as, like an abortion argument. But before you go there, keep in mind that if this brain-dead woman, had not been pregnant, and she had died in the hospital, if there had been a child in the room next to her who needed her heart to survive, they could not have taken this woman's heart from her without her consent. Unless she consented to be an organ donor, they could not have gone in there and taken her heart, even to save the life of a living child in the room next door or anywhere else.
So I guess one thing worth pointing out is that because in both of these cases the individual is dead, in neither case are we actually doing harm to them.
Right.
This has more to do with the people surrounding that individual and how they're prolonging this, but also in the second case where this woman's wishes were not respected, it sets a precedent where the rest of us have less and less security that our wishes will actually be respected.
Right.
I would like you to chop my body up and use it for scientific experiments and give parts to whoever needs it and whatever else. And that's what I'd like to do. Unfortunately, when you're dead, you're dead. And so when I'm dead, I'll no longer have any say over what happens. And so the only thing that I can do right now is take comfort in the likelihood that my wishes will be carried out. And the more cases that we have like this, where people's wishes are being disregarded, the less comfort any of us have that it's likely to happen.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but there's great harm being done to the relatives of both of these people. In the case of the pregnant woman, her husband, and they have a young child also, but her husband and the rest of her extended family, they can't even bury her or cremate her, whatever they would do in this case. They're forced to drag out this process. They know she's not coming back. There's very little likelihood that the fetus is unharmed by this event because, she suffered a pulmonary embolism. It deprived her brain of oxygen for over an hour. It's pretty likely that that had an effect on the fetus as well. They won't know for several more weeks. This has been going on for over a month. They still have over a month before they're going to do the test to determine if the fetus is even viable. So they're dragging this out. This is torturing this family. And then if they do end up, if the fetus does survive a very premature birth and, after its mother's pulmonary embolism, if it's brain damaged or whatever, who's going to pay the medical bills for this very, handicapped child? I doubt the state of Texas, which is forcing this family into this situation, is going to pick up the tab indefinitely for this child. So, I'm.
Yeah, in the first case, let's say there were independently wealthy parents who were spending all their own money to keep the remaining sack of meat, alive, heart pumping, et cetera, for indefinitely.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that would like to just say, hey, it's their money.
Yeah.
And they're not doing any more harm to their daughter. Unfortunately, we can't always look at things in those terms. We have to look at the broader effects on what kind of society do we want to have. Do we want to have this ghoulish society where there's a likelihood that resources, even your own resources, are going to be diverted to a pointless effort that is a denial of the reality of life and death? Or would we rather educate people about how to deal better and cope better with grief and the fact that death is the so far unavoidable conclusion?
Right.
It's tragic that they lost their daughter at any age. I mean, a parent losing a child is just terrible, but they're convinced they haven't lost her yet.
Right, and that's the case. That's especially the case for the young girl in California, because her mother refuses to accept the fact that her daughter is gone. She keeps, saying, "No, I know she's in there,"
And that's really weird because, as I was saying to Jen before the show, if you're somebody who believes in a soul and that the soul is part of the body, aren't you just trapping her soul in the body? I mean, aren't you just torturing a soul by leaving it trapped? I mean, it's like you've come up with a new way of being the Ghostbusters, and instead of crossing the streams and putting a box, you're just using your daughter's body to trap this soul. Let it go. I mean, isn't that the preferable thing for this?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. And if you don't believe in a soul, what are you hanging on to? You know, you're not going to lose any more memories. It just, a lot of it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Which is, we got an email in the last week where an atheist, a recent atheist, was asking, hey, what about end of life thing? I'm trying to decide this, and he was asking, what do you think? And so I said, hey, personally, I intend to donate all of my usable organs so that they can make someone else's life better, and then whatever's left can be cremated.
Make it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
But, and it's one of those things where I don't know the religion of the parents. I mean, obviously, if they put her at a Catholic facility, it's probably something along those lines. But not only this notion of potentially trapping a soul, but, when I was a believer, you're going to eventually be resurrected to heaven with a new body and everything else.
Right.
And what happens to this body doesn't matter any more than really what happens in this life. And so none of this makes sense from a purely theological perspective. And to me, it is really more about people's inability to deal with grief and loss, and religion informing their views in ways that are just completely counterproductive.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a case where religion clearly isn't helping people deal with grief and loss. So,
you want to
let's go to calls.
jump to calls?
Yeah.
All right. Let's go. We'll start with Jordan in Monterey. How are you?
Awesome. How you guys doing?
Good.
Pretty good.
Excellent. So I have a couple of questions ranging from, I went with my girlfriend to see her family in Denver over the holidays, and they are a very religious family. However, they're also extraordinarily intelligent. Her sister's husband is a university professor, and so basically the whole time was all kinds of existential and theological discussions. The most interesting things in terms of what I heard in terms of apologetics that I wanted to hear what you guys had to say about was regarding how we can really know anything in the first place. Because it seemed like a lot of the points he was making to counter whatever it was that we were saying was that somehow saying that you can really know things empirically with solid evidence is some sort of rhetorical trap, and that there is all this larger body of knowledge out there besides that. Mainly he brought up the philosophy of Thomas Nagel, which I haven't read myself. I've read some articles on him. I'm wondering if you guys could talk about that real quick.
Well, I hear this a lot, this idea of how can you really know anything? And it's a big question that I have an interest in, but it doesn't really matter because what we're talking about isn't a requirement of knowledge. It's about what you believe and whether or not your beliefs are rationally justified. So I'd have to know, what do they mean by knowledge? Are they talking about absolute certainty? Because that's a big red herring that I don't care anything at all about, because we don't wait until we're absolutely certain to call something knowledge, and we don't wait until we have knowledge to act. We act in accordance with our beliefs. And so I'm more concerned with what you actually believe and why you believe it. Do you have good reasons? Not whether or not you call it knowledge or you think that it counts as knowledge or it's absolute certain. Because we don't have to get that far. So I don't see what the problem is if people, inevitably when they say, ask these questions about how can you really know anything, it's a way of diverting from the fact that they're claiming to believe something, or in some cases to know something, and offering no justification for it.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's a way of trying to shift the burden onto you so that you're defending a position that you don't actually have to defend. Because they're the ones that are asserting that some God exists or whatever. They have to defend that. And if they're falling back on this like solipsism or something like that as some kind of defense, that's actually not a defense of their position at all. So I just...
It didn't quite feel like that. It was was almost like as you sort of cornered people more and more into not being able to defend these positions. It's sort of like the nuclear option of just blowing up all knowledge.
Yeah.
But what he did offer in terms of whatever positive evidence there was towards their beliefs was he sent us home with a copy of some of Lee Strobel's books, which I'm sure you guys are well familiar with.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're horrible.
In addition to that, a lot of his critiques were he talked a lot about naturalism, and I'm not entirely sure what that is, if that's an actual thing.
So it's two things.
Yeah.
It's two things. There's philosophical naturalism and there's methodological naturalism. And philosophical naturalism is this assertion that nothing but the natural exists. That's not, in my opinion, a defensible position at all, because it is an assertion that nothing but the natural exists, and I don't know how you came up with that. But there's methodological naturalism, which is basically the foundation of science, which is we can only investigate those things within nature. We have no mechanism for investigating things that aren't natural. And so we are going to confine our methodology to the realm of methodological naturalism. And it's not a pronouncement that the supernatural doesn't exist. It's an acknowledgement that because we cannot test for or confirm the supernatural, we're not going to make pronouncements that it is true or isn't true. We're just going to keep operating within this framework. And the curious thing is that for everything that we've found an explanation for, the answer has been natural.
Yeah.
Now, that's still not confirmation that there's nothing supernatural. But it's like I was saying before the show, the James Randi Educational Foundation has a $1 million prize, and they challenge people who make supernatural claims to demonstrate the truth of their claims. But the most they could ever do is demonstrate that, let's say, a psychic who claims that they are getting information from the dead is able to produce accurate information. They can't tell you why. They can't tell you whether it's God, aliens, psychic powers, or the dead, because we don't have the capability of investigating that. So that's the distinction between the naturalism thing. On the subject of how we can really know, for people who go down that road, in addition to what I said before, why not just say, okay, let's both concede for now that we can't know anything, that K-N-O-W becomes a fairly meaningless and useless proposition. Now let's talk about how we can decide what is most reasonable to accept as likely to be true as we go about living our lives. I try to do this. I think it's the foundation of skepticism. I think most people try to do this in most areas, and some people have been conned into not doing this in the area of does a God exist, or any other kind of woo-ish supernatural claim.
I guess it just seems like the only weakness in that argument would be, how do you define reasonable? Because again, that would be something that someone like who I was arguing with could say that saying that it's reasonable or not reasonable is, again, sort of a rhetorical track based mostly on your own predilections or assertions.
It's not just based on individual predilections and assertions. We have methods, and we have consensus in many ways. Yes, is it an absolute, discrete, identifiable, we now have 8 bits of evidence and so we're done? No. And each claim is different, because extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence and trivial claims don't. Is it, and it should be obvious to people, the fact that we can't necessarily quantify this is just a bunch of hand waving. Because if I tell you I have 4 pet cats, is that reasonable to accept just on my word alone? Pretty much, because we are convinced that cats exist and that people have cats. Does it change our worldview if we find out I'm wrong? Do I have to change anything about what I already accept if I accept this claim? And if I'm wrong, how big of an impact is it? Virtually none. It's a trivial claim. If we then provide additional evidence, okay, great, now you've got a good justification. If I tell you that I was spirited away by aliens and visited Elvis for a weekend and was returned, and I was temporarily replaced by a clone, and that's why nobody can know any of this, is that reasonable to believe? Well, no, it's a completely different claim. Everything about it is different. Everything about it exceeds the boundaries of what we already accept and understand. And if you were to accept that based on my say-so alone, you would have to change things that you already accept for really good reasons about the universe. It is constantly a comparative process. We are going to contrast this claim with this one. We are going to see, how much evidence is for this. Where you individually draw the line is completely up to you. But where it is actually rational to draw the line isn't just a matter of subjective personal opinion, which is why we can look around at people who are experiencing serious delusions and say, this person has this mental disorder, or even when we don't know, but it's clear that they are not Jesus and they are not actually having a conversation with Moses and Hitler in this little room. And so to protect them and others, we are going to say that it's reasonable to conclude that they are delusional and put them away. The lines may be blurry, but they're not arbitrary. They're not just, it's all subjective. Oh, I'm not crazy. Okay, cool.
Cool. Thanks. One more thing I wanted you guys to talk about before I go off the line is one of the weirder points he made was that during the so-called Dark Ages, that the church or the religion was not all that detrimental to science. That it, all the claims that there was all this repression of scientific ideas, etc., was widely over-exaggerated. And he points to God's Philosophers by James Hannam. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that book. I haven't read it either, but it's something that he sent my way as a support of that assertion. And I was surfing around Iron Chariots to try and see if there was sort of a big list or of the litanies of crimes against science during the so-called Dark Ages, and wasn't able to find anything.
So even if he was correct, so what? What the church did with respect to science has absolutely no bearing on whether or not their claims about the supernatural are true or believable. I don't think that I can't speak to the actual claims because I haven't read the book. But let's say the church was a wonderful supporter of science who was, it's the only reason that we have science. So what? That tells me nothing at all about whether or not Jesus was God and died for our sins.
Fair enough.
Cool.
All right, thank you guys so much.
Thanks. All right, we've got John in Chicago. How are you? Hello? Oh. For some reason, John in Chicago, you should be here now.
Hey, what's up, Matt? How's it going?
Good.
Right.
Yeah, interesting call. I kind of wanted to touch on your first topic about the woman being on life support and sustained that way.
Okay.
And I just kind of wanted to get your view on it because of our previous conversations. So is it your take exactly that it's wrong to keep a pregnant woman on life support even though she's with child? Well, you said fetus, as if it's not really a child going in there. So if it's going to sustain the life of the child but kill the mother, how do you justify taking her off life support when it could support the life of the child?
Because it's her body, and she asked not to be maintained on life support.
Yeah, one of the things that keeps coming up is this idea about persons and potential persons. And as I noted when I debated abortion at the Texas Free Thought Convention, I don't care about any of that. What I care about is bodily rights and bodily autonomy. And if it had been this woman's desire, keep this sack of meat alive to try to save my baby, then okay, that's her wishes. But her wishes were otherwise. And when we disrespect that, you asked why, do we have any justification to take her off life support? And my immediate thought is you've got it exactly backwards. What you need is justification to keep her on life support. And there may be some disagreement as to that point, but there's no disagreement, evidently, that this was not her wish. So we are violating her wish. So she's dead, so we're not doing any harm to her. And I'm not going to be crazy bent out of shape about an individual case, which is why I spoke about the potential precedents that we're setting with things like this.
Right. I get what you're saying, but is the life growing inside her not justification enough to keep her alive?
No, it isn't. That fetus is completely dependent on her
Right.
body. Okay, that's a biological reality. The fetus's life its interests are inseparable from the life of the interests of the woman carrying it. Okay.
Right.
Biologically,
That's the point.
it's dependent on that. Okay. The woman that's carrying it is dead. Only her body
Her brain is dead, right?
That's dead. Brain dead is dead. Okay.
It's brain dead. But if her body can sustain life,
So
why not
basically,
give...
you're okay with using human bodies as incubators. That your thought of a woman is that she's nothing but an incubator for any potential fertilized egg that she happens to have in her body. Is that accurate? That's what you're saying.
Well, that's your position, is that she's nothing but a vessel to hold a fetus. But my position is the fetus has a life, and
that is,
if you take
that
what
ended.
you're basically saying is it's okay to not give the fetus a chance at life.
Yes.
Yes.
How's that even rational?
Because that was her wish.
Well, what about the wish of the child?
There is no wish of the child.
It doesn't have a wish.
And by the way, it doesn't matter because
how do you know?
And it doesn't.
I mean, it's a child.
John, if she had a 2-year-old who needed an organ transplant and she was the only one that can do it, is it legal? Should it be legal to force her to donate that organ?
No, but what's the difference between a 2-year-old and
That's
Yeah.
it. The 2-year-old is a person by all definitions, so we've taken personhood completely out of the issue. And so if you cannot force her to donate an organ to her 2-year-old, you cannot force her to maintain a pregnancy. This isn't about killing a fetus. It is about whether or not you are going to terminate a pregnancy. It is not the woman's fault that a terminated pregnancy is going to result in a dead fetus. She has every right to her body, and your position seems to be that of many other pro-choice individuals, which is if a woman is pregnant, she suddenly loses all rights with regard to her uterus for that period. And that is absurd.
Well, I guess the question is who decides rights? I mean, does the child not have a right? If a 2-year-old
the woman
can't defend their right for life, does that mean that they don't have a right for life?
If the 2-year-old,
what's the difference between a 2-year-old and a person inside of a womb?
John, that's my point. If the 2-year-old doesn't have that right, why should something that's not a child have that right? You're giving extra special rights to a fetus.
No,
What's your
I'm saying they have equal
No,
rights.
they don't.
No, they don't.
No, okay.
No matter what,
John,
right?
John, the 2-year-old and the fetus have equal rights, correct?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, then if the 2-year-old doesn't have a right to use the mother's body, neither does the fetus, and your argument is done.
No, that's wrong.
Why is that wrong?
Why is it wrong?
Can sustain the life of the child.
No. This is about equal rights. You just said these two should have equal rights. If the 2-year-old does not have a right to use its mother's body, then the fetus doesn't have the right either. You said the rights were equal.
That's completely different. The 2-year-old is already outside of the mother.
It doesn't
Exactly.
matter. It doesn't matter. You said they had equal rights.
To life, not for special treatment.
No. This was equal rights. You're offering special rights, and you haven't offered any justification for it.
Look, if your life is contingent on you being hooked up to my body, then I have a right to say no to that.
Right, but that's different. You have to volunteer to donate an organ or something like
That's
that.
right.
That's
and
right.
you have to volunteer to continue a
remain
pregnancy. If you don't volunteer to continue the pregnancy, you have a right to terminate it.
Who are you to force anybody to stay pregnant?
Well, I'm not trying to force anybody to do anything.
Yes,
I'm
you
just
are.
Yeah, you are.
Yes, you are. If you're claiming that a fetus has this special right to force a woman to remain pregnant, then you are advocating for forcing women to remain pregnant.
No, it's...
So you don't want to force women to remain pregnant.
Force. It's not about force. It's
It
not
is
like
about
saying
force. Yeah, it is about
to
force.
get pregnant.
It is about force,
It's
John.
just-
John, are you willing to allow women to terminate pregnancies?
It's not my choice to allow anyone to do anything. If they choose to terminate their own pregnancy, if they're cognitive and they can make that decision, they'll have to live with the consequences of that.
Great. So
But
you're
to say
pro-choice
that-
then. So you're
But
pro-choice
to say
then.
that a
And why are
child
we having?
doesn't have rights just because it's in the womb, a right to live, aside from the mother's
It has every right to
opinion.
live. It doesn't have the right to live at somebody else's expense.
Well, if they're dead, what's the expense?
Well, now see, this is an area, a very subtle area, where I may actually disagree with Jen slightly, because if the woman is dead, and she's brain dead, then we are not violating her wishes because she no longer has wishes. But my objection is that her wishes were clearly stated beforehand, and this sets a precedent that what you want to have happen to you after you're dead can be trumped by what somebody else wants, and I find that to be a violation as well.
Yeah.
Now, I'll fully acknowledge that there's a subtle difference, and we're not in this particular case about who's being
Well,
harmed.
did the woman specifically say, "Hey, if I'm on life support and I'm
Yes.
pregnant, take me off"?
No,
No.
she said
Even
she
though
said
my baby might have a chance to live, or did she just say, "I don't want to be on life support"?
she said
There's
she
a
didn't want to be
difference
on life support, but her husband, who is her next of kin and who can carry out her wishes, also said she needs to be removed from life support.
He's the
But
one
it's
that.
not his decision.
Yes,
Yes, it is.
And her, right?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
That's what happens.
That's what next of kin means. You can make those decisions for people.
Those are where the legal decisions. That's
Life
the
or
process.
death decisions, though?
Yes, you can pull the plug on somebody. If you're the next of kin, you have
Right
the...
on her, but there's another person involved.
No, there's
No,
not.
there's not.
No, there's not.
So the baby's not a person?
No.
Why not?
Why is it?
Because it has human DNA. It's a person.
So what?
Is it in my phone book? Does it have a social security number? Have we afforded it any rights at all other than the special rights you want to give it over a 2-year-old?
So if a person doesn't have a phone number or a social security number, they're not a person?
I'm offering out possibilities. My
I'm giving you a
point,
contrast. I'm
my
challenging
point,
that.
my point, John, was that
What makes it a person and not a person?
John, my point is that personhood doesn't matter, and you've already agreed to that by acknowledging that the 2-year-old who is a person doesn't have a right to use a body. So I don't care whether you think it's a person or not. That's a separate issue.
No, I believe that if you have human DNA, you're a person. and
Okay,
you have
my
a right to
fingernail
life.
has human DNA. Is it
Yeah.
a person?
What's that?
My fingernail has human DNA. Is it a person?
It's a part of your person.
Is it a person? Your definitions are sloppy. Your
that's not-
definitions, John, are sloppy. Your thinking is sloppy. And you've already conceded this idea of equal rights and that personhood's irrelevant. So I don't know why
No,
we
you
need to
twisted
continue.
that in a different context.
Yes,
Matt.
I twisted it by getting you to acknowledge the contradiction in your position. How clever of me.
I think it's contradictory to say that a mother a mother has a right to life, but her child, which is in her, doesn't have a right to life because
That's not what we said.
That's
not
not,
a
that's not what we
person?
said.
That's not what we said. I grant every fetus on the planet a right to life. It just doesn't have that right, the right to use another person's body to persist.
Well, then, if you believe every fetus has a right to life, then why are you for abortion?
Because abortion is not the termination of a fetus, it's the termination of a pregnancy.
What? Well, if you're not terminating a fetus, what are you terminating?
The pregnancy. You know what they call the late term termination of a pregnancy? A C-section, and the fetus gets to live.
Yeah. Or an
But that's
induction.
not a. That's not killing the fetus. The
That's
fetus has
correct. I
life
just said
until
that.
Yes.
Congratulations,
Aborted.
John.
Yes.
You've spotted the obvious once again. Have you got anything else, John? Because there's other callers, and I don't think we're going to get anywhere.
Well, I was just like for you to acknowledge the fact that you said every fetus has a right to life.
Yes.
That you're for abortion.
no,
if it's not a fetus, if it's not a person, why does it have a right to life?
Why do you keep saying
You're
that
contradicting yourself.
John, why do you keep simply saying that I said it had a right to life when I specifically says it has a right to life, but not at the expense of anybody else, which is the same right to life that all the rest of us have. I don't have the right to knock somebody out, hook somebody up as a filter, and let them filter my blood for me, even if it sustains my life. I don't have that right. And I'm not going to go affording special rights to fetuses just because someday they could possibly be a person.
They already are a person according
No,
to
they're
their
not.
DNA.
Okay, and I don't really care. I don't really care if it's in there writing poetry and you're convinced that it's a person. That doesn't change the rights issue of bodily rights.
Well, it seems like you're in serious contradiction about what you deem, who you deem has rights and who doesn't.
No, actually, you're the one who's contradicting yourself. Matt and I are completely consistent about what we're saying. Is that If there's
No,
a
you're consistently saying it, but you're not consistent with your argument. You're
oh, no,
contradicting
it's
what
completely consistent.
Who you deem to have rights and who doesn't.
No.
If it's a person that has rights,
that's not
but
the
if it's
argument. The argument
John.
is that a woman has the right to let a fetus use her body to sustain itself or not. That's her choice.
John, do
but
you?
the fetus doesn't have a right to live.
It has a right to live. It
If
doesn't
she
have a
wants
right
it to.
live at the expense of somebody else. Do you have a right to use somebody else's body to sustain your life? Do you,
I'm
John?
already
Do you,
born, no.
John? Do you, John, right now have a right to use somebody else's body without their consent to sustain your life?
Not after I'm born, no.
Well, why is it different after you're born? Isn't that granting special rights to the preborn?
No, because what right
John,
do you have to
John,
abort a
John,
fetus?
John, that was a yes/no question. So you say
Right,
you
well, I'm
you
drawing
say
a
John,
parallel, so
stop,
you can see
John.
how it's-
For Christ's sake, stop interrupting me. You said that you have this right. You don't have this right after you're born. That's what you said. And that is a clear acknowledgement that there's a difference between the right you have after you're born and the right you have before you're born, is it not?
But it's a different situation.
John,
is
it
what
doesn't
I'm
matter.
trying-
Would you
Matt,
answer
is
my
what I'm trying to
fucking
say.
question? Yes or no, is there a difference in the rights you're attributing to people before they're born than after they're born?
But there's a difference in the
John, you're
dependency.
done. There is a difference. You're sitting there denying it all the time. I'm not. There's no special. But that right only exists after I'm born, or that limitation only exists after I'm born. You have an untenable position because of the contradictions, and I'm sorry that we tricked you into recognizing it to the point where you couldn't even answer a simple yes/no question that was, by the way, a direct restatement of what you had already said. You need to think your stuff through a little further, because that was horrible.
I don't think he's going to think it through any further.
I don't either. It's a baby. I don't need to think. It doesn't think. I'm not going to think for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, Patrick in Minneapolis, how are you?
I'm great. Yourself?
We're good.
Exhausted.
Good. Hey, well, yeah, I bet. And I'll make it quick. And especially after that last call, I've heard there's kind of a movement change on the name for anti-abortion people, and I think this guy's case in point. It shouldn't be pro-life. It shouldn't be anti-abortion. It should be pro-control. They clearly are just trying to control the uterus.
Yeah.
Yep.
So anyway, and then my other thing is, I'm starting to establish, or at least understand more of my atheism, or like at least don't want to be labeled as a secular humanist. So if someone asks me, "Are you an atheist?" I should pretty much say no. Or what argument are you bringing up? Is that not correct?
Aren't you an atheist?
I am.
So
But
why
I mean,
would you
that's the
ever
thing, like,
say?
Shouldn't they
Why,
have to say like?
why would you say no if they ask you you're an atheist? Isn't that a lie?
Well, I mean, I guess my response should almost be, well, so are you, because the one thing I know, theists have in common with atheists is atheism.
No, actually, that's a little wordplay that some people have come up with, which is just crap. Theists aren't atheists just because they don't believe in other gods. The question is, do you believe in a god? If the answer is yes, you're a theist. If it's no, you're an atheist. It doesn't matter that they are atheistic with respect to all the gods they don't believe in. I mean,
So there isn't such a thing as polyatheism, right?
no.
Okay.
It's a discrete, there is a God or there isn't. You either believe there's a God or you don't. And there's no middle ground. There's no poly, none of this.
That honestly cleared it up completely. And I'll let you get back to hopefully some theist calls. You
Okay.
guys are my atheist rock stars. Keep it up.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Well, that was easy.
Atheist rock star pose. Which I'm sure is going to get photoshopped as some kind of Satanist thing.
Of course.
Because we're under attack and associated with Satanists, in part because of that monument that they're wanting to put up.
Oh, yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I love. I love it. I hope it wakes people up to the limitations of church-state separation. Also, I want to point out that I actually received my copy of A Better Life.
book.
Which is bluish, so,
Yeah, it's
so
gonna-
it shows up. So this is, so I've got
Yeah,
a
that's
sky
awesome.
and everything. It's a book by Chris Johnson, 100 Atheists Speak Out on Joy and Meaning in a World Without God. And it includes some really great thoughts and beautiful pictures. A nice coffee table book. I'm in it, but I won't pimp my page or anything else. But yeah, thank you to everybody who worked on the Kickstarter for this, and especially to Chris for traveling all around the world to talk to people and getting us a cool
Yeah.
book with lots of really good quotes and pictures. All right, so we've got Edson in Provo.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello, Matt? Hello?
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Now
Can't anymore.
Yeah, now we can't hear you.
Why do I think that Harry Platypus was coming at the end of that call?
I don't know.
I don't know. How about Patrick in Quebec?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay.
How you doing?
I'm fine. And you?
Doing very
Okay.
well, thank you.
Well, I wanted to talk about my path to atheism because I'm an atheist now and proud of it.
Okay.
Okay.
And it's a big part because of you guys and the show.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Well, as long as we
All
don't
right,
go on for
it
too
was,
long. 'Cause-
It was like a 9-month journey, and then I was born and I was an
yeah.
Yep.
We're not starting your life story with, but then I was born. And ending with Harry Platypus, which I'm sure was coming.
Yeah.
So for the record, the Harry Platypus call from last week. Years ago, there was a guy who used to prank call the show. Some little kid, he ran a thing called James Calls In.
Yeah.
He's back, and actually his YouTube channel is back. And I've said before that I don't really mind prank calls. It's really hard to tell until they get to the punchline which calls are prank and which ones aren't. So as long as there's a good conversation. But one of the things people like about the show is, in addition to the debate-like dialogues that we have with theists, is hearing people express what they actually believe. So I'd prefer not to hear people try and parody those.
Yeah.
And nobody started liking the show because somebody called in for 45 minutes to tell us their life story.
Yeah.
I mean, even interviews probably don't focus that much on somebody's
Well,
life story.
and the thing is, I understand the value of this whole coming out story thing. I understand the need to tell these, and in some cases the need to hear them. It's just that we've got a limited time here on the show, and that's really not the format of the show. So my recommendation is, if you really need to tell your story, get a blog. Write it in a blog. Post it on Facebook. Tell your friends. Yeah, write a book.
And it's worth pointing out, too, because we had this long conversation with John, which on the prompter was supposed to be about morality, and that can turn into a big conversation. It's worth noting that atheism doesn't have any particular position on abortion. Atheism is a position on whether or not there's a God. And so there are atheists and secular humanists and others who would disagree with me on the subject. I'm only speaking for what I think, and same here. The ACA does have a list of position statements, so we're keeping in accord with that. But I'd like to kind of avoid those, I mean, to some extent, because I'm okay talking about morality and these other things. They tie into it, and there's no denying that religious belief is a very strong indicator of one's position on the abortion issue. And that's why I'm willing to take those calls on occasion. But the same is true for evolution, and my atheism isn't tied to evolution. I think I agree with Dawkins that it's much better to be it's much easier to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist, because now you have a proposed and seemingly correct and well-sourced explanation for something that everybody wondered about.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got Darren in Puyallup. Are you there?
Yes, hi.
Hi, Darren.
Hi.
Yeah, so I'm an atheist, so I agree with you on that, but I think I disagree with you on the treatment of religion as a way for people to act morally. And it seems like, as far as I know, because I haven't seen all the episodes and I don't know you personally, but based on at least the fact that you have a show about it, you would rather everybody act irrationally and become atheists than blindly accept the faith of religion.
Yes.
Which I like,
Yes.
but my problem with that is that for people who would, if they found out there was no God and there was no punishment after death for acting immorally, a lot of people might act immorally and not
How do you
have
know?
fear of any punishment beyond the punishment that they have in life.
Okay.
And so, yes, were you going to say something?
Yeah, there's actually no evidence to support that claim. And,
Yes, I know that, and
there's
and it
some
is entirely
evidence.
possible that if everybody were atheist, it would be a much better world. And I remember, it might have been, in fact, the last episode, you mentioned that there's a correlation between a country's religiosity
Yes.
and the crime rate and rape rate and things like that. But that's not necessarily causal, and that also could be just based on which religion it is. For example, I was thinking if there are people who would not act morally if they knew there was no punishment, we might instead want to convert everybody to, for example, Jainism or something else that is, although still totally unfounded, it would have, it's at least philosophically moral. It's most important tenets
why
of
do you,
nonviolence and things like that.
Okay, stop. Why do you think that, why do you claim that some people need religion in order to behave? What makes you say that?
I mean, I don't know that for sure, and I could be completely wrong, but I'm just saying
would
that
say
we
you are
shouldn't
completely wrong.
assert that nobody needs religion to act morally until further evidence is suggested. So I'm thinking.
So you're shifting the burden of proof.
And as far as I know, it's probably better to convert everybody to atheism, but
so
I
Darren,
don't know for sure, and I think
Darren.
it's better to find it. Yeah. What?
The phones are having problems. Darren, what you're doing is shifting the burden of proof and claiming that we need to demonstrate that it's true, that absolutely everybody would be better off without religion. And that's not even a position I actually hold. I'm sure that some people would be devastated if they gave up their religion, and some people would perhaps be inconsolable, and some people would go around being more immoral, and I don't give one rat's ass. I really don't, because what I do care about is truth. And many of the things, and I don't think that, I think it's important that we believe as many true things and as few false things as possible, because every false belief we have potentially informs another false belief. And so let's purge all these out. And if it turns out that the world is ultimately worse off, that almost doesn't matter. Because then at that point you're saying that it's better to believe a lie and be happy, which is kind of like saying, why don't we all just get drunk and ignore the world's problems? If it turns out that a problem in reality is something that you can't solve, this is just way too difficult. There's no way for me to ever fix this situation that I've gotten myself into. It doesn't do any more good, actual good, to think that God's going to fix it than it does to merely recognize that it's unfixable and we should perhaps move on. It is amazingly arrogant and condescending to say, hey, let's not be so hasty about getting rid of religion because there's probably some people there who really need this. Yeah. I don't need it, and most of the people who've come out don't seem to need it, and generally speaking, people are better off, but there might be some of those, so let's hold off a little bit. No, I'm just going to keep talking about the truth.
And that's actually my big problem with people that say, oh, not everybody can give up religion. You know, there's this smug attitude that, hey, you know, I don't need it, you don't need it, but hey, there's this other group of people and they need it. We need to make sure that they are kept ignorant and, you know, believing this nonsense because they can't handle the truth.
It's like saying that if we took Santa Claus away, kids would no longer have a right to be good, or a reason to be good.
Yeah.
It's just an argument I find silly, and you know, even pointing to Jainism or the Jains as some morally virtuous position, I reject that wholeheartedly. I think they are absolutely stalling progress in the betterment of humans with their extreme positions. And so, while certainly a Jain is much more likely to be a harm to themselves than to others, I care about people who are a harm to themselves as well.
Yeah, that is my own biggest problem with my argument there. Whenever I'm thinking about this stuff, I always think about that part, and I haven't really found a way to resolve them. And you probably are right that a few enough people need religion to act morally, that it's not justified to sacrifice truth for morality.
So think about this. Think about this. Think about this for a second, Darren. Take all the religious people, just in the United States, or actually, let's just take the Christians. How many of them do you think are actually behaving morally because of their religion? How many of them do you think would fundamentally change how moral or immoral they behave? I mean, it's not like it's only atheists out there committing crimes. So the religion isn't necessarily even a good indicator of how moral somebody's going to be, not to mention the fact that of those who people would point to as being moral within the bounds of their religion is actually immoral and doing harm. And so why wouldn't we get rid of that? I mean, what benefit is there? Is there something that Christianity or Jainism or any religion offers that is a true and accurate guide to morality that is also working, that people aren't ignoring? You know, hey, I believe in God, but I'm still going to go out and, you know, drink and party and do my thing. And this entire topic is one that I just find tedious because generally speaking, I don't see that religion has that much of an impact on whether or not people are going to be moral or not, with the exception of where religions specifically encourage people to do something immoral and convince them that it is moral.
Yeah, so what you're saying is in most cases, and as far as we know, that religion tends to be more of a justification for what they're doing, whether that's moral or immoral. It can be I'm doing this great thing because I believe in God. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, and if you can,
justification using religion is wrong.
If you can pick and choose, then you basically pick and choose to justify what you already want to do. And I think it was Weinberg pointed out that without religion, good people will do good things and bad people will do bad things. Mm-hmm. But it takes something like religion to make good people do bad things.
Yes, and that's probably true. But my point is that until we know that that's what it is, because as much as I have experienced, that tends to be the case. Good people will be bad, bad people will be opposite. Good people will be good, bad people will be bad, and religion is just extraneous from that. Until that is proven with, as difficult as it could be, I can't myself justify trying to convince everybody of the truth and to look skeptically at things if that could have a negative impact. And I'm getting this from, I'm kind of taking it a step further than the person who I got it from took it. But I read the book, Breaking the Spell, Religion as a Natural Phenomenon by Daniel C. Dennett.
Yeah, who would, by the way, I can confidently say, agree with what I just said. I can confidently say that Dennett would agree with my position.
Yes, I think you're right. But in one part he mentions that before, because Dennett's point in one part of the book, I forget which chapter it was, but his point is if we should try, it's religion as a natural phenomenon, and so it's talking about if we should fight the natural phenomenon or not, or treat it as something that will just naturally happen and not try to convince people otherwise because it could upset the balance of morality. But I don't know if that is the case, and so I actually do agree with you that we should just fight for truth rather than what might enhance morality.
Kate?
All right.
Yeah. I just wanted to bring up the topic.
Sure. Thanks.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Have a great day.
Right. Okay. We got just 3 minutes or so left. Is it Jevon?
Yes, Jevon.
Jevon in Chicago, how are you?
Yes, thank you. I'm a first-time caller. I'm a first-time watcher of your show. I've been watching for the last 3 weeks. And I just needed you guys' help because, well, here it is. I believe I'm on the cusp or the edge of being an atheist. But there's just one thing that really bothers me. And I'm hoping that you can find that and pull it out of me a little bit.
I got 2 minutes. Let's see if I can do it.
I don't believe in creation of the Bible, but the scientific view does confuse me. It confuses me because I don't really understand it as much, and I was thinking maybe you can help me out with that. But also, when I throw in things like, the holographic universe and the double slit experiment, when you have the particle looking back at you or stopping, I don't know, it just doesn't really have things, but it gives me pause about what's going on
So,
and does this relate in some way? Go ahead.
I can fix this in 10 seconds.
Okay.
Do you actually believe that there is a God?
No.
Then you're an atheist.
Yeah, congratulations.
Atheism isn't the assertion that there are no gods. It's not a claim that we've proven that there aren't any. And this idea about something, whether something can come from nothing or double-slit experience, none of that matters. You're
So
either
not understanding the beginning of reality.
You don't have to understand the beginning of reality to be an atheist.
Nope.
Okay.
Because here's the thing, either there is a God or there isn't. Those are the only two possibilities. And let's imagine that we know nothing about the origins of the universe. We still don't have any reason to think that there's a God. And when we know a little bit more, even if we don't understand the current scientific explanations, that doesn't give us more reason to believe in God, now does it? It would give us less, assuming that it was correct and we were on the correct path. And the only time at which we would have more reason to believe in a God is when there's actually evidence for a God. And none of that goes anywhere near evidence for a God.
So not understanding the creation of the universe, or not understanding the math or the science of it, is not really the question.
I don't understand it.
Really mine.
Right. Yeah, I mean.
I'm not a cosmologist. I'm not
either.
I've had conversations with Lawrence Krauss, and I understand about half of what he says, maybe. And that's in a really light conversation. It's okay. An atheist doesn't mean that you can't say, I don't know. I don't know. There's lots of things I don't know. But I do know that of all the God claims that are out there, none of them have met their burden of proof. I don't know that all those gods are false. That's not necessarily my position, although I think that we can demonstrate some of them are.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Real quick. Do you believe in the holographic universe of like everything being inside of us?
Nope.
And, no? Okay. I was confused
I
about
don't
that, too.
necessarily understand it well enough to have an informed position, so I have to say I am not convinced that it is true, so I don't believe it, but that doesn't mean that I believe it's false.
Okay. Well, thank you. I love your show, and I'm going to continue watching and watch all your videos and stuff and continue to educate myself, because I have a crazy Christian family that just, I don't even hang out with anymore because they, I'm a demon spawn and all this other thing. So,
yeah. Well, that's unfortunate.
I'm in that book now. I'm in that corner now with my family. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry about that.
Okay, but I just have to be true to myself, I guess. So that's what it's about.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Definitely. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
We have no time. They're actually putting up the credits for all the people who make the show happen.
Okay.
Am I on again next week? I think I'm on again next week.
I think you are.
Oh,
With Tracy.
Then I'll be back with Tracy.
That's right.
And then the people who emailed saying that Tracy and Jen had to do a show together.
That's right.
I'm the go-between. I'm doing a show with each of them.
I know. Yeah,
So brain dead is dead is the point.
That's right. It's dead.
And everybody who called today, not brain dead,
Yeah.
no matter what you might think about some of the arguments presented. See you next week. I don't even have to hook them up to like an EEG or anything. No matter how non-responsive John is,
Okay, we're clear.
it's
So
a different non-responsive.
do we want to take any post-show
Yeah,
calls?
I don't know. Hey, Justice?
Yeah.
So the show's over, but you can still talk to us for a minute or so.
Okay, I was just, actually that's kind of relieving because, first time I had never actually called on anything live. There's a lot of people watching. I was just going to call up and say, I really appreciate what you guys do. I think that, especially in, Texas, I think it's really impressive that you guys do what you do, to help branch out, find other members of the atheist community, especially in, areas like that. But I was actually going to call up and ask, and since, we don't really have time, I was just going to get a short answer from you guys because I know there's one more caller. I'm just going to say that I agreed with the hospital that they shouldn't have kept her on. This was about the first argument with the woman and the fetus still inside of her, that they shouldn't have kept her on. There's no reason to keep her going, but Texas state law had to keep it going, and that they should have respected her wishes, but I believe that they could have, or they could if she's still going. I'm not too familiar with the story, that they could keep the body going just in time to see if they can get to a C-section, and whether or not it's successful afterwards, they then, provide her life support, bring her off, and If the father, though, doesn't wish to have the child, that they could just abort the pregnancy now, and you could hopefully try the successful
But
pregnancy
the thing is,
sometime in the future.
there's no reason to even abort the pregnancy. All they have to do is unplug the ventilator. And that was her wish.
So there's a lot of little subtleties to this. For example, if she had not expressed her wishes at all, and I would allow her next to kin to make that decision, because we're not doing any harm to her. If nobody had expressed an opinion, I wouldn't really have too much of a problem with them keeping her alive, as long as we had good reason to think that the fetus was viable and might perhaps survive with this. But the fact that this is Texas law is part of the problem. The law should not be able to trump someone's expressed wishes. And if that's being done, that's where I have the problem. I mean, we're not hurting this woman at all, other than, disrespecting what she clearly stated her wishes to be.
And the harm right now is clearly to her family, because they know what she wanted. They wanted the same thing, and they're being prevented from carrying out her wishes and theirs. And they're forced to just drag this whole grief process out for as long as it takes.
And if her husband or her husband's insurance ends up getting a bill over all of this, I hope that they nuke the state of Texas in court with fines to get his money back.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for your time, guys. I know that I can't really discuss anything since we're off the air, so I'll be sure to tune in next week and try to get another call with another issue.
Cool.
All right. Thanks.
Hey, Chuck, you still there?
Yeah.
We're shutting down the studio, but we figured we'd let you talk for a second.
Yeah, I have an argument against the resurrection, I think. And it has to do with this idea that says that Jesus ascended into heaven, right?
Okay.
So, if you argue for a bodily resurrection, you have the problem of where did Jesus go?
No, not really. So, as soon as you have God is magic and Jesus is magic, this idea of ascending into heaven, while it might have been, biblically intended as a heaven is directly above us in the clouds or whatever, you could have an ascension into the clouds, and then once Jesus is out of sight, he's actually taken to the immaterial plane where heaven is. So that one's kind of easy to knock down.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, at that point, it just becomes spectacle. It's like, hey, what would look cool? We'll have him float up into the clouds and disappear and go to heaven that way. I will say, though, that it would have been cooler to have him sink into the ground. Like melting into the ground. I'm going to heaven now.